Hey everyone, welcome to part 43 of my Pokemon game series in Unity. So in this video, we'll create a fader which we can use when we switch between scenes. Okay, so you can see that switching between scenes is much more smoother when we have a fader. And then we'll also create an indoor scene and look at how to switch to that. So it's going to be pretty similar to the other scenes, but there are a few challenges while implementing indoor scenes. So I thought I'll cover them separately. Alright, so let's look at how to do all this. Special thanks to all my Patreons for making the series possible. By becoming a Patreon, you can support me in the making of the series and get access to some cool rewards like the complete project files of the series, which also contains some advanced features that are not covered here. So let's start the video. So let's look at how to create the fader. So we'll create the fader inside the Essential Objects prefab. This is because we want the fader to persist between multiple scenes, just like all the other essential objects. So let's open up the Essential Objects prefab, and in here, under the canvas, I'll add a new image called fader. Alright, so we want this fader image to be as big as the canvas. So for that, I'll press Alt and I'll click here and I'll select stretch on both sides. Okay, so when we do that, the anchor of the image will change to stretch in both directions and the image will be as big as the canvas. Alright, so next I want to change the color of the image. So I want my fader to fade to black. So I'll change the color to black and we'll change the alpha of the fader to 0 so that the fader is not visible by default. And when switching scenes, all we have to do is smoothly change the alpha to 100 in order to fade in to black, and then we can change it back to 0 in order to fade out. Alright, so to do that, I'll create a new script. So I'll create this inside core and I'll create a script called fader. Okay, so let's assign the script to the fader game object. And let's open this in Unity. Alright. So in this script, first we need to cache a reference to the image. So let's do that. So in order to use image, I'll have to import Unity engine.ui. So let me do that. And then in the awake function, I'll cache a reference to the image. Alright. So next we need to create two functions, one to fade in and other to fade out. So first, let me create a function called fade in. So it's going to be a public function and it's going to be a coroutine. So I'll name the function as fade in and it'll take a float, which will be the time in which we should complete the fade in. Alright. So this is going to be the function. So in here, we just have to fade the alpha of the image to 100. Alright, so for that what we can do is we can use a doTween function called doFade. So in order to use doTween, we'll have to import using dg.tweening. So now we can use doFade. So to this function, we have to pass the n value of the alpha. So here the alpha is represented between 0 and 1. So 1 means it's fully visible and 0 means it's invisible. Alright, so We want to make the image fully visible. So I'll pass 1 for this parameter. And the next parameter is the duration in which we want to fade. So for that, we can pass our time parameter. Okay. So I want this toFade function to be executed as a coroutine. So what I'll do is I'll call dot wait for completion, and I'll add yield return at the start in order to wait until the fading is complete. All right. So now let's copy this and create the fade out function. So here we want to fade to alpha of 0. All right. So now we have functions to fade in and fade out. So let's call these functions while switching the scenes. So in the Portal script, we need to grab a reference to our fader game object. So what I'll do is in the start function, oops, the autocomplete is not working due to some reason. So let me just type this out. All right, so in the start function, we'll grab the fader by calling find object of type, and we'll pass the fader in order to get a reference to it. Okay, so let me store it in a variable. So now in the switch scene function, before loading the scene, I'll call fader dot fade in, and let's say we want to fade in 0.5 second. All right, so I'll add a yield return at the start in order to wait for it. So before we start loading the new scene, we will fade the screen to black. And once you're done with loading the new scene and setting the position of player and all that, then we can fade out and make the new scene visible again. All right, so I'll call fade out from here. So this should work. Let's go to Unity and test it. Okay, so if I switch the scene, you can see that it's fading in and then fading out, which gives us a smooth transition between scenes, and it's way better than loading the new scene instantly. All right, so yeah, it's working pretty well. So next, let's create an indoor scene. So it's going to be pretty similar to the other scenes, but there are some challenges that we need to solve. So let's look at how to do that. So in the scenes folder, I'll create a new scene, and I'll call this house 1. Okay, so basically we are going to be building a scene that's inside the house. All right, so first we need the tile map grid. So we can copy the grid from our hometown scene. So I'll copy this and I'll go back to the new scene and paste it here. All right, so we don't want all these tiles from the hometown scene, so let's erase everything. So I'll go to tile palette and select the eraser. I'll actually select a big area and then select the eraser so that I can erase large portions at once. All right, so we erased everything from the solid objects layer. So next, let's erase everything from the background layer, and finally from the long grass layer. Okay, so let's actually turn this into a prefab so that we don't have to keep erasing everything when we create a new scene. So I'll drag the grid here in order to turn it into a prefab. And let's start creating our new scene. So if you go inside the art folder, here we have a separate tile sheet called inner. So this has lots of tiles for creating indoor scenes. Okay, so let's slice this tile sheet just like we did for our overworld tile sheet. So I'll select this, change the sprite mode to multiple, make sure the pixel per unit is 16, filter mode is point no filter, no compression, and hit apply. Alright, so next we need to go into the sprite editor, click on slice, change the type to grid by cell size, and since all the tiles are 16 by 16, we need to change it to 16 by 16 and click slice. Okay, the same stuff we did for all the other tile sheets. And finally, I'll hit apply. And we need to create a tile palette out of this tile sheet. So inside the tile palette, I'll create a new one called indoor. Okay, I'll put it inside tiles and I'll drag and drop the inner tile sheet here. Again, I'll select the tiles folder. Alright, so it'll take some time to import all the tiles to our new tile palette. So I'll pause the video and get back once this is over. Alright, so it's done. So let's create our indoor scene. So in the grid, I'll select background and paint some tiles for the floor. So next we can place any decorations on the floor if you want. So for example, if I want to place this carpet, alright, I need to choose the brush and I can place it anywhere. But there's a problem. We want the carpet to be on top of the floor tile, but since we are drawing in the background layer itself, it's actually replacing the floor tiles, right? But we can't place things like carpets inside solid objects. If we do that, then it'll have collisions. So what we can do is we can add another tile map called foreground. Okay. So this will be for objects that needs to appear on top of the background layer, but doesn't require collision. Okay, so in the tile map renderer, I'll change the sorting layer to foreground so that it will appear on top of the background. Okay, so now if we place a carpet, it will be placed on top of the floor tiles. Okay, so I don't want this carpet here. Instead, let me just use this carpet tile to create an exit. All right, so this is where we can place the portal. So next, let's place all the solid objects. So even for solid objects, we will need two layers here. So for example, the wall will be a solid object that needs collision, but on top of the wall, we can place stuff like windows and paintings and cupboards and stuff. All right. So if you look at the solid objects layer, it's in the foreground sorting layer. So what we can do is we can duplicate the solid objects layer and name this as solid objects base. So it'll be inside the foreground sorting layer and the order in layer will be 0. But for the actual solid objects layer, we will change the order in layer to 1 so that it will be on top of the solid objects base layer. So let me just rearrange the tile maps in the hierarchy. Oops, since this is a prefab, I can't do that. So let me actually unpack this prefab. Alright, we just made it the prefab so that we can easily drag and drop it while creating the scenes. So now let me just rearrange everything. Okay, so now in the solid objects base layer, I'll add the wall. Okay, I'll use this style for the wall. And inside the solid objects layer, we can add all the other solid objects. All right. So if I place a cupboard here, you can see that it appears on top of the wall since the wall is in solid object space and the cupboard is in solid objects. Okay. And if we want, we can place stuff like windows and paintings and all that in the solid objects and it'll appear on top of the wall. Alright, so what else can we do? Let me try adding a bed. Okay, so you can go ahead and design the scene properly. I'll stop here since this is just a tutorial. So let's try to test the scene. So we don't want the main camera in the scene. Instead, we want to place the essential objects prefab. Alright. Actually, we must place the essential objects loader prefab, right? We should not place this directly. Okay, so let's test the scene. So yeah, it's working fine. Collisions and all are working very well. Just one thing, I want the background of the camera to be black instead of blue. So let's change that. I'll go inside the essential objects prefab and under the player we have main camera. So I'll change the color to black. Alright, just to make it look like the Pokemon games. So yeah, that looks much better. So next let's add a portal here to go out of the scene. So from the prefabs inside the scene management folder, I'll drag and drop a portal to the scene. So let me reposition this. So in Pokemon games, the portals are placed right below the exit. So I'll place it like this. And let me make sure that it's at the center of the tile. Okay. And the spawn point should be +1. Okay. So this portal should load scene 0, which is the hometown scene. And let's set the destination portal to C. So next let's go to the hometown scene and add a portal there which will take us into the house. Okay, so I'll just duplicate this portal and I'll call it portal C for clarity, and let me reposition it. So I'll place it here, and we haven't yet added our new scene into our scenes list. So let's go to build settings and do that. Okay, so the index for our house scene is 2. So in this portal, I'll change the scene to load to 2 and I'll change the destination portal to C. Okay, so now if we try to step on that portal, oh come on, Let me just disable the trainer so that he won't bother me. Okay, so now if we try to go inside the house, here you go, it works fine. And we can also move out of the house. Okay, but there's a small issue. Our portal is actually placed over here, right? It's not placed on the door tile, but it's placed on the tile that's below the door tile. So the problem is, if I was walking like this, even then I'll step on the portal and get transferred to the new scene. So this is not how it's done in Pokemon games. The portals are actually placed on the door tile. So if you want to achieve that, it's a bit tricky. So let me show you what I mean. So if I place the portal on the door tile, okay, then what will happen is we won't be able to step on top of the portal. So it's because the entire house, including the door tile, is actually in solid objects layer. So since the door is a solid object, we won't be able to step on top of it. So there is a way to solve this problem, but it's a bit hacky. So let me show you. So right now, all the tiles here are in solid objects layer, right? So what we can do is we can erase this tile from solid objects. So I'll take the eraser, select solid objects, and I just need to erase a single tile. So I'll erase this tile from solid objects and I'll place that tile alone in the foreground layer. Okay, so here inside the grid, let me create a tile map for the foreground. Okay, so I'll change the sorting layer to foreground and let me just place it below the background. Okay, so now we can select this tile and paint this in the foreground instead of the solid objects layer. Alright, so since this is in foreground, the player will be able to walk on top of this tile. So let's try this. Okay, so you can see that the player is able to step on top of the door tile. So we were able to solve that issue. So the only problem is this approach is a bit tedious. So for every single house, we will have to manually remove the door tile and then place it in the foreground tile map. So yeah, it works, but it's a bit tedious. So if you guys know any other better ways, please post it in the comments and let me know. So yeah, that's it. So we implemented an indoor scene in this video and the transition looks much better since we have the fader. So yeah, I'll stop the video here. If you think these videos are helpful, please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing to my channel. That'll really help me out. So I'll see you in the next video.